So welcome to our next episode of Coaching Outdoors. And once again, we have not one, but two guests. But actually, the second guest is slightly unusual because instead of having two legs, she has four. So Clive and Miss May, I would love you both to introduce yourselves. So clearly, Clive, you might have to introduce Miss May for herself.
I will. So nice to see you, Anna Marie. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you today. So I'm Clive Leach. I'm an organisational coach, and I love my job. And I get to work in a variety of different contexts: education, government, corporate, supporting people to perform well and to be well. So it's about feeling good and doing well. And this is my buddy, my companion, Miss May, who's a 3-year-old golden doodle. And as you'll find out a bit later in the podcast, she's one of my partners in crime, and we now get to do some hopefully meaningful work together.
And I have to say, if you're listening in and not watching today, if you have a chance to just check out a bit of the YouTube clip later, it's definitely worth it. Miss May is sat being very well trained and beautiful, which in comparison to my 18-month furball, he would not be quite so obedient. So thank you so much both for being here. And we really wanted to we're really keen to have a range of individuals who work, within the outdoors with nature. And clearly, we're a part of nature. I feel like friends are part of nature. And it's ultimately how can we kind of co-create with each other. So before we kind of dive into how you guys met and your work together, bringing it back to you, Clive. And this is a question we ask all of our guests is, what is your earliest memory of being outdoors? And why do you enjoy being outdoors so much?
Right. Okay. Well, it's really interesting because my earliest memory of being outdoors is actually on the south coast of England in Worthing, where I was brought up, when my mum used to take us to the beach, to the seaside regularly, as tiny kids, really. And so I was always had that amazing opportunity to sort of be outdoors by the sea. And also we lived very close to the South Downs. And so we were equally able to be into the countryside. So that whole notion of the green and the blue, if you like, has sort of been with me from a really young age. And I think what's really interesting and fascinating is that I'm back where I started. So I'm actually back living in my hometown. I moved back down here in 2019, just before lockdown. And having been very fortunate to have traveled, in many, many parts of the world, been all over the place, to actually come back to where you started from, and have this amazing opportunity over the last 2 or 3 years to get back into the local green and the local blue again. So I spent the last 2 or 3 years really with May down on the beach, up on the Downs, and 5 minutes walk from Sisbury Ring and South Downs National Park. So that's where we spend our time. And I think the key thing in terms of what I love about it so much, certainly over lockdown, which has brought challenges for everybody in so many different contexts, but it's that opportunity just to savor and to be, whatever's going on in the world, whatever's going on for us personally, just that chance to be out in nature has been an absolute lifesaver, to be honest. It's been absolutely wonderful. And to be able to share it, obviously, with this one too, has been even better.
Oh, I completely understand. And Alex would too. Unfortunately, she's having technical challenges today, so we are cracking on without her. But we are both massive big dog fans, and for me, spending time on the trails with Bryn it's just something really. It's just joy in the moment. There's no kind of outcome. I'm not striving for something. It's just really that being.
Just that being, the being. It's lovely, yeah.
And the South Downs is a beautiful part of the country as well. It's really quite mesmerising, the shape of the landscape that comes through. So I can well imagine why you were drawn back. And then taking a step from, very much nature and your work with Miss May, I'm really curious about your kind of choice to go down this route, because it's very niche. And then how did you meet Miss May? I'm sure there's a story in there somewhere.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. Well, from a coaching perspective, I mean, obviously, I've been involved in the coaching world now since around 2009. I went to Australia in 2009 to do my master's at the University of Sydney in coaching psychology, and that's what sort of really introduced me. I started some work in coaching, but I decided I wanted to make coaching a career. You know, I wanted to sort of, and I thought, well, if I'm going to do that, I need to sort of go to the best place to learn, really, which is why I went to Australia to do my study. And that set me out on a journey I would never ever have imagined I would have been able to embark on. Again, having worked with such a wide range of people and organisations over the years. But one of my sort of jokes, in a sense, is I graduated from Sydney University in 2008, but I never actually left. You know, I just continued my relationships. I continued to write papers. I went to the conferences, kept up that network and that learning. And so every year I would try and go to the leading coaching conferences or the leading positive psychology conferences, the European PosPsych Conference and the World PosPsych Conference, which were alternate years. And I was, in 2019, I was already planning my move down to Sussex. So for the first time ever in my life, I could contemplate having a dog, because I was moving back to an area where there was space, there was room, and I was, you know, planning not to try to travel quite so much, despite whatever happened later with lockdown. So the dog was on the agenda, definitely on the agenda, in the mind, if you like. And then in July of 2019, I went to the World Positive Psychology Congress in Melbourne, and I met an amazing lady called Ros Rhymes and her positive psychology dogs, Rafa and Flash, two gorgeous Labradoodles. And I'd never thought in my wildest dreams around sort of doing something around well-being and dogs. It hadn't ever really occurred to me, particularly. And then having met Ros, who was so interesting, so inspiring, and her dogs and the work that she was doing in canine assisted education, it sort of thought, oh my gosh, you know, I want a dog, but maybe I could find a way to integrate my dog in some way to the work that I do. So fast forward a month, literally a month, I was in Singapore working and I had a day off and I was exhausted, so I didn't go out anywhere. I just stayed in a hotel and I started to think about, well, I need to start finding a puppy, because timing wise with travel, the puppy needed to arrive at a certain point in order to fit in with the plans for 2020. And so I was looking through this quite credible website for litters, and I came across a litter that was 1 day old, and it was like, oh my gosh, that's a litter 1 day old. The timing is going to be perfect. And as I was looking at the information about the litter, and they were like golden doodles, the mum was a well-being dog. So the mum, Freya, Miss May's mum, was a well-being dog. And I thought, oh my God, this is meant to be. It's meant to be. So I rang up the breeder literally from Singapore and said, like, I'm in Singapore, but I'm going to be coming home soon, and I really would love to sort of be considered for one of your puppies. And the lady kindly sent me an application form, which I filled in very, very quickly and sent back to her. And then within the next day, she came back and said that basically, yes, we could have one of her puppies, which was amazing. And so that was in the August, and then Miss May arrived in the October at home with us. She was obviously already born, and then it was a case of having sort of now got her. She was very feisty when we first got her. She was sort of like, as all puppies are, but you know, she was just so sweet and such a wonderful nature. So then over time, I thought I started to look into how I could, you know, sort of do some sort of work with May on a more sort of formal basis, and we came across Pets as Therapy, the national charity, and contacted them, and then I think it was probably 2021, because May would have been about 18 months old. We went for our Pets as Therapy assessment, and the assessment is really interesting because it's not so much about her being trained to be a therapy dog. It's really more of a temperament assessment. But the important thing is they also assess you together. So they're really interested, not just how the gentle nature of the dog, it's actually how you interact with the dog, which is really important. So we did our Pets as Therapy assessment, which we passed. And then we were able then to start to think about how, I was then able to think about how I could then start to integrate May into my work around well-being.
Wow, I love those moments of serendipity sometimes that come in your life. You can't imagine It's
No,
almost like
no.
this bigger universal force, which can be a little bit
Yeah,
intangible. It can be a
yeah,
little bit unnerving at times.
yeah. Weird.
And
Well,
then
the other element of that, which I didn't say, which was so sweet as well, is that May was one of 12 puppies, I think. She was a very, very large litter. On the private Facebook page, you can see all the puppies and the collars and the different color collars they had. And there's always this little one, a girl I was drawn to with a green collar. And for some reason, I kept airing towards this tiny one, and she seemed to be one of the smallest. And I said to the breeder that actually we were airing towards a girl. We didn't mind, but a girl would be nice. And the breeder called us up just before we were out to go and actually sort of see the pups for the first time to say, managing expectations, but all the girls have gone. And it was like, oh, okay, no worries. You know, well, the boys are lovely and everything too. And then when we actually got there, the day we got there, she said, oh, just funnily enough, one of the girls is still available because of some allergy issue and it was the little one with the green collar. So it was absolutely, so again, that's serendipitous, something pulled us together. And so it was just a complete no-brainer when I saw her that's my girl, you know, and yeah, it was just really sweet.
It's meant to be. It's meant to be. So would love to hear a little bit more about, you know, clearly the relationship that you've got together, and then, you know, the training that you went through once you passed the assessment. Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
That must have been a relief. And then, you know, how you've created this and brought it into your work.
Yeah. Okay, so there's different ways really. So in a coaching perspective, a number of times, not that often, but a number of times I've been able to work with people locally in Worthing or in the area. Like most people, lots of my work has gone virtual over the last sort of three years particularly. What I've been able to do when people are interested is to take May along with me for coaching sessions. So we've met outdoors. So I've met people on the beach. I've met people up on the downs, or sometimes in a cafe or a pub or somewhere where we can get a quiet space. And so May being present, I think, is just a really nice way to sort of get people grounded and get people comfortable. And obviously, I would only do that if they requested. I mean, I would talk about May if they're interested, and they would say what they'd like to meet her. So I would bring her along, and I think it really creates a like a safe environment when May's there, and people certainly relax, and you know they just obviously they like to give her a pet and stroke her, and they're always interested about her. And it's a really nice way I found to build rapport with clients as well. And on that note, in my office, I have a big photograph of May behind me on a shelf. And I cannot tell you how many people come on my calls, and it could be the first time I've actually engaged with them, who actually say, oh my gosh, what a beautiful dog. You know, tell me about your dog. And they're genuinely interested, and maybe they've got dogs themselves. And it's a really, really nice way, I think, just to build a sense of, you know, common understanding between coach and coachee. And, you know, maybe if you're a doggy person, you can't be that bad a person, you know, because if we love dogs, you know, that's what we like to think as dog lovers, don't we? And so I think in that way, she has an impact as well. And then more formally, from the Pets as Therapy perspective, we started by going into children's homes, into care homes for young people. I have a background in youth and community work, so that sort of resonated quite strongly for me. And that's been lovely, taking her in to meet young people who are a bit like, oh, there was a dog in the house, you know, when you first come in. And then as they engage with her and they start to play with her in the garden and, you know, play with the ball and things, they really start to sort of ask, again, very curious, wanting questions. We can take, with the staff alongside, we take her out for walks, and they're able to sort of take responsibility for her. So that's been really nice. And then in 2021, my father was in hospital 3 times during COVID. He didn't have COVID, but I think everyone's worst nightmare in COVID was seeing your parents being taken away in an ambulance and not being able to visit them. And so 2 times my father was in hospital. We weren't able to go in and see him. So he was just literally in the hands of Worthing Hospital. And the 3rd time he went in, we were able to go in. And we were just so impressed with the way that he was cared for and the interactions that we had. You know, we were obviously trying to get information and regularly, daily, having to engage with the nurses and the consultants about what was happening. And people were so caring and so kind. And I thought then that, wow, I really would love to be able to take May into the hospital, really as a bit of an acknowledgement for what they'd done for my dad, really, and the care that they'd shown us as a family. And so I then applied through the hospital trust to become a volunteer with May, and that took time as well, obviously not just in terms of waiting for the restrictions to end, but going through all the checks and bits and pieces. And then we started last April working on the acute stroke ward, so which is really, you know, one of the most challenging wards in many ways. And again, from a sense of perspective, whatever one's own challenges are, when you spend time on an acute stroke ward and you see the challenges other people are facing, it's very you know, inspiring what's going on there. And so yeah, we go into the acute stroke ward, and May is able to go in. She interacts with the patients if they're able to interact with her, very much the visitors, because the visitors are obviously there with their loved ones, and everyone's got a story about a dog, their own dogs or somebody else's dogs. Some people say, "Oh, I don't like dogs," and that's fine, you know. And then they say, "Oh, can you just bring her over? Can we just, you know, how old is she?" And you know, so it's really interesting how even people who actually sort of are a bit shy of the dog initially often warm to her. And she's able to put her paws up on the bed, and people are able to touch her and to stroke her, and give her a treat, which she loves. You love your treats, don't you? And then, of course, the other element of the work is the support of the staff, because she's their dog. We're going back hopefully next week after her maternity leave period, but she sees the staff every week. We go in, and they look forward to her coming in, and they have their little moments with her as well. And we have little sit downs with the staff. One of my most powerful memories has been a member of staff who actually wasn't really into dogs and couldn't really understand, like, why a dog, why well-being? I don't really get it, you know. And we ended up sitting on the floor, literally on the floor of the ward, with the sister and a couple of nurses and me and May, talking about dogs and well-being, and the biopsychosocial element of well-being with dogs, that actually they help us to calm down and savor and be present, and that psychologically they help us to sort of get into a more positive mindset. And then the social element is the look around. And actually, as we looked around, nearly every bed, the people sitting around the bed, they were all smiling, all watching us just sitting on the floor, engaging with May. And you could really sort of get that sense that it was something sort of very powerful to bring into what is a very, very challenging environment.
There is so much richness in what you've been describing, and just hearing your story unfold, I hope, is a real inspiration to people who are listening in as to how a seed of an idea can really grow, and the benefits, the ripple effect that has out. It's just, you'll have touched so many people in so many different ways that you won't even have an awareness of. And it's just so heartening to hear. And hopefully, you know, for our listeners, it's this stepping beyond sometimes the, you know, accepted classic prescribed notion of coaching, and actually embracing something different, and really bringing it back to what really kind of is authentically you, like what works, and what sometimes just following that kind of little breadcrumb trail of an idea, what can emerge from it.
No, it's true. And I think from my perspective, it's like, it's you know, it's that sense of being able to be. I mean, as a coach, you know, my job, one of my jobs, our jobs, is that ability just to be, not have an agenda, try not to judge, try not to, you know, and to give that space to our clients. And I've just become conscious over the years, I guess, is how much more comfortable I've been able to be to do that. And I find that going into the environment within the hospital, it's obviously a stressful place. People are very, very sick, and there's lots of real big challenges going on, and the staff are under enormous pressure. And my job is to go in and I have no agenda. You know, my job is to be. My job is for me and May to go there and be, and to ask questions and to engage, and you know, which is very much what we do in a coaching capacity. And I've had some wonderful conversations with people, and even conversations where people have you know, shared with me things that I've been able to help them with things sometimes, you know, pass on messages for them sometimes, you know, so you feel you're sort of adding a bit of value beyond even the visit you're actually making, you know. And certainly the staff, and even some of the staff have said that they've got dogs and they're now thinking about doing work with their dogs, you know, which is lovely as well. So again, it's what Ros Rhymes did for me. Maybe I'm able to do that for other people as well, and help them to realize that they can share the love, you know, which is wonderful.
No, very much so. And hospitals are an essential part of our medical fabric. And when you think about dogs, it's always, you don't often put the two together. And actually just by, you know, it's kind of bringing nature indoors more and appreciate it and being and cultivating that relationship. Though I would love to pick up on the fact that you shared earlier that Miss May was just about to come back from her maternity leave.
Right. Yes.
So, there's clearly some puppies involved. So
there are. Yes, there are. Okay. Yeah. Yes, October the 26th. So this is Finn, who is May's little boy, who's not actually so little. He's 3 months old, and he's about 16 kilograms already. And yes, and so this is one of May's offspring. So we had two puppies. We were a bit surprised, only two, to be honest. I mean, we were expecting a few more than that. But actually, we were quite fortunate, lucky, we think, in the end, because two was enough in terms of the work. And yeah, so this is Finn. So who knows, one day he may be a pets therapy dog himself. We'll have to wait and see. It's quite energetic at the moment.
Oh, beautiful. And just for people who are listening in, you missed a treat. Finn is a proper black.
He's a black golden doodle. Yes, he's like a big furball. So it's interesting to see how he ends up. You know, he might come back in a moment. But yes, anyway, but he's got a lovely nature already, and we're just looking forward to seeing how he grows up. And May was a wonderful mother as well, so she did a great job.
Oh, absolutely gorgeous to see, and really very much increasing the brood, spreading the work.
Yeah, I think it might be on the way back. So yeah, and a great experience actually having never had puppies before. It was a great experience. So there we go. It's the two of them.
So yeah, we've now got both, a little bit of affection going on between the two.
I know.
So we'll just see.
Okay. Okay. Right then, off he goes.
And that did really strike me as we were talking earlier with dogs, that it's the touch, the ability to touch, and how the benefits of that. I think as humans, we've almost touch starved in some places, and actually having that permission to the kinesthetic, tactile part can be really, really beneficial. I don't know whether any of the kind of the research from the psychology side.
The research does. I mean, we're talking about the oxytocin effect. You know, the cuddle hormone that's generated through that exactly that. You know, that ability just to touch the dog, to be with the dog, to feel the dog's heartbeat, to feel the dog's fur. Actually, sort of has a really positive impact on our biology, which is great. And just that sense of, you know, I think it's just a real de-stressor. You know, when you've got a big 30-kilo dog deciding to come and lie on top of you and pin you down for a cuddle, it's a bit like, just to be here and enjoy it, you know.
And that's it's always you shared earlier a little bit of an example with one of the Ward sisters and how you observed the benefits, and clearly confidentiality is something we utterly respect with our clients. So if there's any other kind of illustrations, our listeners always love that kind of fly on the wall experience that really kind of brings to life the impact that this type of interaction can have. Yeah,
well, absolutely. I mean, certainly there's been cases where from the hospital perspective, we've been patients who are very, very poorly, who have a real lack of mobility, and who are not able to talk. And with May being there, the family member that's there, or the visitor that's there, has asked for May to come over and said, like, you know, so they're happy for her to come over, and they'll try and encourage the patient to touch her, to stroke her head and to feel her head. And they've actually then seen the patients really beginning to reach out and actually smile and really start to acknowledge, there's a real sense of understanding that there's something really positive and kind and good there. And that's really lovely to see as well, and they will say, they're so pleased that they can just see the way it's lifted the mood of the patient, in some ways by very subtle signs, but they're able to sort of see that, and they're really, really thankful for it. They're very grateful for that short, small interaction.
Mm. And if any of our listeners were curious about following this path, what advice would you give them?
Well, I would advise them to check out Pets as Therapy, obviously, is the website. Ros Rhymes, who I mentioned, has got a fantastic website. She's based in Australia, called Live with Zest. And so I really recommend anybody who's interested in doing any work with their dogs, check out Ros's website, just to get a sense of what you can do, and the range of work that she gets to do with Rafa and Flash in colleges and universities and in medical settings and things as well. So just see what other people are doing. And people want a bit more research. If people want to know a bit more about the science, there's a woman called Nancy G, has got a 2021 paper, so a very recent paper, looking at the biopsychosocial benefits of interaction with dogs and canines. So that's a very recent peer-reviewed paper. If people wanted to dive a bit more into the research, so there's some great resources out there. But I think it's really, I was just sort of following my own story. It's sort of if you're interested, find other people who are doing something similar and interact with them, ask them. We all, at the end of the day, we like to be asked questions, most of us, about what do you do? Well, how did you do that? And how did you go about doing that? So reach out. And obviously, if anybody wants to contact me through LinkedIn or whatever measure they want to use, that's fine. I'd love to talk to people.
And thank you for sharing those resources. We will make sure that they are all linked in the interview. And this article as well, the peer review published one. Yeah. We're always keen just to really ground our practice in the science. Yeah. And I mean, you've kind of touched on a few points previously. It would just be great to have a brief overview of what was revealed.
What was, sorry?
What came out of that research?
Oh, I see. Oh, I mean, well, the what came out of the research is that essentially dogs have a positive impact on our biopsychosocial well-being. That they have an impact on our physiology, which is good. That we're physically stronger, have the better quality hormones racing through our bodies, if you like. Alleviating stress and anxiety. The fact that psychologically they're really good for us in terms of improving our mindset and helping us to get greater perspective on life. And from the social perspective, almost goes without saying, but they're just a huge way to build social resilience. And again, I can speak to that from my own perspective, because I've met through having May, I've met people in my local community, in the local coffee shop, who I can now sit down and have coffee with and talk to. When I moved back, I didn't really know, apart from family, I didn't really know people here at all. I also, over Christmas and New Year, my father's still not that well. And we went to my parents for over Christmas, and we were able to take the dogs with us. We took the puppies because there was only two. We could take both puppies and May. And I can't tell you how uplifting having the dogs with us over Christmas and New Year was, because it just brings an added sense of light and laughter and amusement and interest to our family. So the family's stronger. My nieces love the dogs, so they come and look after them and take them out, and that means I see my nieces probably more often than I would do if we didn't have dogs. So there's all those benefits can come through.
I think it really is an adage to the frame, dogs are a man's or a woman's best friend. Yeah. And that really comes true. And I think it also in a way challenges some of the, what's within, the work, inverted commas, environments, and how can other animals, other sentient beings be introduced for...
Well, I think dogs in workplaces are obviously far more recognized, or the value of having dogs in workplaces. I mean, there's lots of organizations now have bring your dog to work activities and events and policies and procedures, recognizing again that having dogs in the workplace is good for the well-being of their employees. So I think there's lots of really good work there.
It harkens back. My mother was a primary school teacher, and I grew up with dogs, and our dog Reva, who was a brown Labrador Retriever, right. And my mum would take him into the classroom. So he would be there from a young pup, and once he'd had enough, he'd go and sleep in the cupboard, and then he'd be out with the children again. And also for me, being in a military background, dogs were a part. Like, you'd have dogs in the office, in the mess, there'd always be like a bundle of them. And it just really does bring something else. And this very much similarly, where I'm living at the moment, barely met the neighbors, and then Bryn arrived, and all of a sudden you speak to everybody on the street. So that a real connector.
Yeah. And of course, one of my hashtags for May is PermaPup, which draws on the Foundation for Flourishing, for feeling good and doing well, which is PERMA, so PERMAH, and it's just really obvious to me that May brings me positive emotions. She allows me to feel serene. She makes me laugh. She makes me proud. She inspires me. I love her, obviously, which is a really positive emotion. May supports my engagement. So through May, I'm out there doing things in the world that I would otherwise not actually get to do, and which is really important too. As I've just mentioned, May supports my relationships, the R of PERMA. So I'm more socially resilient than I would be otherwise. She certainly gives me a sense of meaning and purpose in my life. I mean, I think one of the challenges I find in my executive coaching work, it's really interesting, is how many people who are very successful in their executive roles in their 40s, 50s, who actually acknowledge that they haven't got a great sense of meaning in their life. It's all been about work, and sometimes work isn't that really meaningful. They make a lot of money or whatever, but and actually, where do we get our sense of meaning in life? And certainly, I think having a dog, having a pet, certainly can bring a huge amount of meaning to people's lives. The A of PERMA is about accomplishment, and we are out there accomplishing things together, which is wonderful. And I think you made that point about it's great to have ideas about things you'd love to do, but we also need to act on those ideas. We need to get out and we need to make things happen and do things. So I think there's a great sense of accomplishment. And then the H of PERMA is about our health. There's no question. I can absolutely verify that May has been incredibly important to my health over the last 18 months or so, through the exercise, through that ability to be out in the fresh air and taking advantage of our local environment. So that's why I think she really is a PERMA pup, and dogs have a real potential impact on our capacity to flourish and sustain our capacity to flourish, because it's hard out there, isn't it? The world, it's not easy. So we need all the support we can get.
That's such a catchy hashtag. I will definitely be checking it out. And it really just brings it back to the heart of positive psychology. That theory really, really grounds it. And I love the way that you've interpreted it and how it helps really sense make your experience, and also communicate to others the different facets of which your relationship and the work that you do together supports others. Wow, thank you so much, Clive. It's been an absolute pleasure. What have we missed? What have we not touched on within your dynamic duo together?
Okay, well, I suppose, in terms of our work together, I think we've touched on a lot. I think we've managed to get through a lot. But I think that wider connection to well-being and the workplace is an important one. I think people being more open to well-being, whether it's through bringing dogs into work as one way of enhancing well-being, but I think making that link. I mean, the work that I do, in the organizational work that I do, is really focused on trying to make this link between performance, because we all want to do as well as we can. I would imagine that's our aim, but so often the performance, in my experience, is seen at the expense of well-being, rather than actually recognizing how it's enhanced by well-being. And so certainly some writing I've done over the last year and a half or so. I managed in lockdown to get involved in writing some new book chapters, and I was, again, quite proud of that work. There's the Positive Psychology Coaching in the Workplace, the new Springer publication. If anyone's interested in how positive psychology coaching is relevant for work, it's an amazing book to get, because it's 30 plus chapters looking at leadership and resilience, and such a wide range of up-to-date good practice and research in there. And then recently, the latest chapter I've had published was in a book called Applied Positive School Psychology, which was on self-efficacy and development in schools, which I wrote in partnership with Susie Green and Daniela Falecki. And that's been really important for me also, because, and there's a reason why I'm telling this part of the story, is as I talk to people about self-efficacy, I'm sort of almost surprised a bit sometimes about how little people understand about it. People know about self-confidence, but they don't really seem to know much about what self-efficacy is, and the fact that we can be confident about many, many things. That doesn't mean we're going to act upon it. And we can be confident sometimes that we're going to fail at things. We could be confident the other way around, that we're actually not going to be successful. And self-efficacy is much more about having the confidence, but taking the steps, the action towards it. And one of the key influences around self-efficacy is what we call vicarious experience, which is looking at role models. It's looking at how have other people done that. It's about being inspired by what other people do. And so I've, as you study and research and you write, you learn more about these things yourself. And it's really struck me how my self-efficacy has been built and developed over the last 10, 12 years, particularly through vicarious experience, through social support, verbal persuasion, where I've been able to see ordinary people do just amazing things and think, well, actually, if they can do that, then maybe I can do that. But how do they do that? And how do you get, so you engage with people, you ask questions, you approach people, and then you have a go and they give you feedback, and so that's really been really meaningful for me. And bring it back to full circle, Ros, many people I'm grateful for in my professional, personal life who've supported me. I mentioned Susie Green and Professor Tony Grant from Sydney Uni, who just set my whole world on a different path completely to where I was going at the time. But again, coming back to Ros Rhymes in Sydney is a really good example of vicarious experience for me, by seeing other people doing something that they're passionate about and seeing the value of that and thinking, oh, maybe I can do that. I can do that too. And here we are, 3 years later, and we're doing it. We're living it, and that's wonderful. And I'm very, very grateful for that.
And that's part of our mission on the podcast, is to be able to have a platform that shares people's experiences of how they live like this, in the hope that it will plant seeds and enable others to give themselves permission to live in that way as well. And that's why inviting people like you who have these stories that are so full and rich and real and impactful is so important, to encourage, whether you're a coach or a manager or you're just listening in, actually what is possible. And ultimately that's part of the magic of coaching, is to create that change. Yeah,
absolutely. So we're privileged people, aren't we, to be able to be in this world, but we work hard at it too. That's what I sort of say. It's like, it doesn't just, none of these things just happen. You have to put the energy and the effort into it too. But the dividends are so powerful.
Well, thank you so much, Clive, and Miss Way as well.
You're
is
welcome.
Still sat looking
She's
very
still
patient.
Come up again, just for one more. Come up. One more couple before we
yellow
go. There we go.
She's got
her bandana. There we go. Sit down. She's a good girl. There we go. Then.
Oh.
She's back.
So just remind us where we can reach you.
Okay.
If any of our listeners or watchers are kind of keen to make contact. And
well, I think the best place really is through LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I think it's a very generous community. If you use it right, I mean, that reciprocity on LinkedIn is amazing. I love sharing. I love receiving from people some incredible things that people share on LinkedIn, and it's always up to date. So LinkedIn always captures what I'm up to recently as well. And you can direct message me on LinkedIn. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'd be very happy to obviously connect with people and to answer any questions or make connections if that would be helpful.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
It's been an absolute pleasure catching up. So we are both alumni from the University of Sydney. So I was there after you, and then Oxford Brookes as well. So again, I think it's a real nod to, you know, as coaches, we love learning, we go on these courses and we make connections. Actually, then down the line, how many years later, it's really interesting tracking people's careers and where they go and what they do. So, So to our listeners, hopefully you've discovered our back catalogue of interviews. If you haven't, you're in for a treat. We are now on series 5. So clearly there's 4 series waiting for you to dip into. So just a reminder of the website is coaching-outdoors.com. So that's coaching-outdoors.com. Thank you for taking the time to listen in or watch. As always, we love to hear your comments, feedback. If there is any topics or anyone you would like us to interview, have conversations with, please do let us know. This whole project is all about you and how we can encourage you with your coaching practice. Thank you.
So if you enjoyed what you've heard, like it, share across your network, and subscribe to our YouTube channel and LinkedIn community page, the Coaching Outdoor Podcast. Thanks so much in advance for your support.